everybody. Welcome to another episode of the LitRPG podcast. I'm Ramon Mejia. I'm here to bring the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and of course, author interviews. This is episode 51 of the podcast. We skipped right past 50. We had Michael Scott Earl on last week. Had a nice author interview. That was episode 50. Go check that out if you have a chance. And of course, this week I'll be reviewing quite a few titles. I believe we're going with 8 or 9. I've lost count at this point. But I'll be reviewing Lion's Quest Trinity. After that, The Crystal Crusade. After that, Reincarnation RPG, Part 1. After that, Part 2. Yep. Then after that, Travail Online Broken, which is a short story in that series. I'll be reviewing the second story in that series next week. Then I'll be reviewing this week, though, the Crucible of Immortality, Book 1, Synthesis. After that, War in the Greenwood. And then after that, Rules-Free VRMMO Life, Book 1 Tutorial. Yep. And finally, Conquest, a LitRPG story from the SciFan universe, Book 1. But of course, we begin our show, though, with LitRPG news. And we begin LitRPG news with the announcement from William D. Oran, author of the Super Sales on Superheroes novel. He's commented recently that the audiobook edition of the novel is going to be narrated by the wonderful Jeff Hayes, and it should be ready about late June. So, hey, that's a pretty good turnaround for a really top-notch LitRPG story with superheroes and resource management. It's really good. I had a great review of it last week. Additionally, in LitRPG news, Luke Chimilko has a new cover for Ascend Online Book 1, and it looks pretty darn nifty. I gotta say, I'm really impressed with the artwork for this cover. It's a lot nicer than the last one, and I like the last one, but this one is definitely a couple steps above it, so go check it out. I think it's very, very pretty. And last in LitRPG news, I have the great, sad duty of telling you that a member of the LitRPG community has passed away. Tom Shutt, a great writer in his own right. He helped a number of authors, LitRPG authors in the community with their novels. He has passed away, and there is a GoFundMe campaign going on right now to help his family cover the cost of the funeral. We'll have a link in the show notes for you if you would to support him, his family, that way. Okay, that's going to be it for LitRPG news. We have a couple of new additions to the audiobook section for the LitRPG community. These are from Audible. Of course, we have a link in the show notes for all of them. The Commandant chess set, Way the Shaman Book 5, is out on audiobook. World Seed New Rules, World Seed Book 2, also out on audiobook now. Also, Soulstone, The Skeleton King. That's the second book in that series. And then also Tinker Tailor Giant Dwarf, Difficult Legendary Book 2, also out on audiobook edition. So go enjoy those if you enjoy listening to LitRPG stories. Okay, these stories are also out right now. They came out this week. There were a ton of stuff that came out. Like I thought I was going to be like not busy, and there's just so many stories I couldn't read them all. And these are out. Go check them out if you want. But I'm going to be reviewing them next week on the show. The Road East, which is the second book in the Feywild series. Office Wars, The Mailroom Clerk, super funny. Solaria Online Launch is also out now. Travail Online Resurrection, which is the second book in that series. And then Kingdom Level 2, the second book in Kingdom LitRPG series. I'll be talking about that next week. Okay, in upcoming LitRPG, on the 30th of May, we'll have Spellbinder, The Shadow Legacy. On the 31st of May, The Eternal Dragonborn, Book 2 in the World of Game series. On the 31st of May, we'll also be getting Eden's Gate, The Sparrow. On the 1st of June, Hero of Thera. On the 2nd of June, Fantasy Online, Hyperborea. Also on the 2nd of June, Stay on the Wing, The Dark Herbalist, Book 2. And then on the 6th, of June, we have Stone Raiders Return, Amarillia, Book 6. So there you go, folks. That's it for May and June. There's some other stuff in July and August, but you can check those out at our website at geekbypodcast.com in the recommendation section or on our Facebook page for the podcast. LitRPG Podcast. There you go. Okay, on to new releases and reviews. And new releases and reviews, folks. We have a ton of reviews. I mean, a lot of stories came out, and I tried to read them all. Couldn't quite make it. Have most of them taken care of, though. We have Lion's Quest Trinity, written by Michael Scott Earl. Great story right off the bat. It is 420 pages, $7.49. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Full disclosure, I received an early copy of the novel, but purchased it as soon as it became available. Bam! That thing was purchased on Amazon. Leo Leonox is back, searching for the next relic in the land of San Duport. His best shot at getting the relic is to help one of the royal candidates survive her assassins and serve as their champion in a series of contests to win her throne. That's my summary of the novel. The review is going to be broken into two parts, mostly because the novel itself is essentially broken into two parts. One part of the game world and one in the real world. The storylines are connected, but they're different enough that I can review them sort of separately. First, game world stuff. The game world portion of the novel is top-notch, outstanding. It's the best of the three novels in that sense, in the game world portion. The novel drops you right into the action, rarely slows pace, tons of fighting, tons of action, adventure. There's some great game stuff happens later in the series. There's a new character in the novel called Bulwark. He's a Conan the Barbarian personality squished into a tiny gnome body. Adorable, fun, interesting. He kind of disappears about midway through the story. Not disappears, but like he's not as prominent as he is in the beginning portion of the story. And that's okay. He's not the main character. He shouldn't be as prominent as the main character. But just be aware that he becomes just like another assistant to the main character, but it's still a fun little character. I liked him. The story has enough twists and turns that it kept you reading. There are plenty of challenges, and there's also some political intrigue. There's a story about royalty, who's going to send to a throne out of like 6 or 7 people. So there's a lot of cool story stuff there. So that's the game world part. Now the real life portion, not as good. I mean, it's still a good story. It's just the real life story. A storyline of the novel is not as good as it was in book 2 for me. There's still lots of action, people trying to stop them from making the game for some reason. It's well written. It's very interesting. I'm not saying it's not in that sense. It's just in book 2, the real life storyline had such emotional weight and impact that I just that's why I gave it a 9, because that real life stuff just went above and beyond. And it really got me. Tears in the eyes kind of stuff, and which is fine. And that in book 3, it's not as good. It's understandable. You can't kill major characters off in every single book. You can't, play the most people's emotions every single novel. I get that. It's not bad. It's just not, to me, as good as it was in book 2. That's what it is. From my point of view, the storyline, the real life storyline, didn't really advance much. Everything that I was given in that real life storyline was not new. I already knew that people were trying to stop the game. Not new there. I knew that Leo, the main character, was getting bleed through from the game he was playing. I also knew that the artificial intelligence, the characters in the game, felt so real to him that he was questioning whether or not this is a game or this is a portal to a different dimension or to a different world or whatever it was. So none of that was new. And so that real life storyline didn't really advance. It really just felt like it was there to confuse the reader, to try to obfuscate whether or not this is the game is really a game, or if it's really a portal to a different dimension or to another world or whatever it is. And the author admits, we talked, I interviewed him recently, and he was like, yeah, that's intentional, not a mistake. And he says he plans 13 books. And so I get that he can't tell us right off the bat whether or not that's the case. He has 13 novels that he expects to write. And so you want to save some good stuff like that from like later on, at least not in book 3. So I get that. But for me, again, it just took the real world storyline down a peg. It's not mad or anything. It's just not as good as it was before. And that's okay. Overall, still an amazing story. You're doing yourself a service if you're not reading it. It's really enjoyable. It's one of my favorites now. The game portion of the story gets easy, 9 out of 10. The real life part gets a 7 out of 10. So I'll average it out. The novel itself will get a score of 8 out of 10. Thank you. Okay, on to the Crystal Crusade, a LitRPG venture written by Mars Dorian. Okay, this is 250 pages. It is $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Again, full disclosure, got an early copy review. Honestly, I would never be able to read this many stories if I didn't have a little bit of headway to read them in advance and write reviews, so don't get mad. But I purchased it again. As soon as it came out, paid the full ticket price, even though it is available on Kindle Unlimited. I like to support the authors whose work I enjoy. So there you go. Okay, main character Dasho is an out-of-work young man living in some future with his mom in a trailer park. He lost his good computer job to robots and now spends his time playing around with full immersion virtual reality games. As he plays the latest game, this one right here, the Crystal Crusade, he finds that the artificial intelligence NPCs in the game are more complicated and lifelike than he ever anticipated. So he's kind of playing this game with an old gamer mentality, and it doesn't really work with this new system. Now, if Dash decides to make a good trying to earn a living playing the game, he'll have to lose his reputation as a bad player that lets NPCs die and become powerful enough to attract a sponsor. So that's kind of my synopsis of the storyline. Now, the beginning of the novel is really good. I actually enjoyed it a lot. It drops you right into the game world where the main character takes his first quest, an escort mission. He's supposed to find a non-player character out in the wild, save him from the monsters there, and escort him back to the academy, the place that is the tutorial section of the game. Unfortunately, he decides to do a different thing. He instead of saving the non-player character like he's supposed to, he steals the non-player character's axe and leaves him to be killed by monsters, which in most situations, most games, it's like, oh, okay, that kind of sucks. That's not a great thing to do. But there are no real consequences in other games. Again, that reflects his old gamer mentality. But in this game, it matters. The non-player characters, no. And the players who play this game for a living or playing it for fun or just dedicated to it, they start to ostracize Dash because they consider him a murderer who's killing somebody who they consider sentient or at least realistic enough that they care about these NPCs. And so that's a very interesting story choice from the author. And I really like the fact that he gave the decisions that the players made in the game world weight because of that. And that felt really nice to me because in a lot of games, again, you can do whatever you want. There are no consequences really. And in this case, there were. I like that about the story a lot. Now, unfortunately, that goes away as soon as the main character leaves the academy, which is fine. I was just hoping that it was going to be an actual theme through the entire story. And the author has messaged recently saying that it becomes a bigger theme in like book 2, which is about halfway through. So hopefully when that book comes out, we'll see that thing come back. But for now, after that point, it becomes just more of a traditional hero gaining power, learning his way around a game world kind of story, which is fine. But I was hoping for more because of that great beginning. There's a lot of fantasy influence in the story, which is really good. You get to see rideable chocobo-like birds, sword guns, antidotes, high potions, X potions, and the sci-fi action in the story is really well written. I liked the weapons. I mean, who doesn't love a good sword? Really. The last battle was especially great, very epic. The game mechanics and story are familiar, and personally, they're not as detailed as I would have liked to see. But again, that's a story choice from the author. I love to learn about class skills, weapon skills, in detail, weapon characteristics, damage notifications. I'm big on those kind of things. And while I don't require them to be LitRPG, I like them as on a personal note. And this just didn't have all those details. It was so the game mechanic stuff was just, it's okay. Not anything to write home about though. One of the things that I did like about this game mechanic story was the war tech class that the main character chooses. Really cool class mechanics, cool abilities. I like that. I wish I knew as much about the other classes in the story as the author told me about the main character's class. That's kind of it. The real life villain in the story, a government agent, was bad. He was not badly written. He was a bad dude who got under my skin. Like at several points, I'm like, I complained out loud like, this guy's a jerk. I can't believe he's doing this, which means he's a good villain. He does his purpose. He justifies his existence because he's a villain. So that's good writing to me. Overall, had a really good time reading the story. Would have again liked to see the more consequence mechanic from the beginning continue through the story, but is what it is. Still a good read though. Gets a score of 7 out of 10. Okay, on to Reincarnation RPG short story 1 and 2, written by Eric Colomby. Okay, 15. This is going to be for the short story part 1 of Reincarnation RPG. It is 15 pages, 99 cents. It is not available on Kindle Unlimited. John dies while playing his favorite video game and is sent to a fantasy world as his overpowered character, where he's supposed to save a woman. It turns out that woman is the god that sent him to the world, and she's trying to eat his soul. He kills her and then walks into the forest. The end. That's literally the story. 15 pages for 99 cents is just too much personally. It's really expensive for such a short story. And there's barely enough story here to call it a short story, much less LitRPG. Like, there's a game theme in there. I'm not just being that there isn't. There's just no progression of power. The character starts out OP as heck, overpowered as heck. So there's nowhere power increase, and there's nowhere explanation of the game mechanics because there's just not enough room to do it here. And I get that. It's a short story. I'm not complaining about that. It's just that it didn't really satisfy my LitRPG itch. So I'm like, oh, okay, it gets a 4 out of 10. Part 2, though, is significantly better. It's 30 pages. It is for free now, which is always a wonderful price. Normally, I believe it's going to be 99 cents. So for 30 pages, again, it's a little iffy, but get it now. It's free. It's also available on Kindle Unlimited, so great price point. Again, if you want to skip book 1, please feel free. There's absolutely nothing in there that you need to know to enjoy book 2. The author also offers book 1 for free if you sign up for his newsletter at the webpage he has in the novel. It's a little iffy to me. Honestly, I'd just say skip it and enjoy book 2. It's enjoyable enough. It's a quick read too. It's like 10-15 minutes, so it's not long. There are a few references from book 1 that are sort of explained. What I really need to know is that an overpowered character with seemingly infinite amount of skills has been transported to a fantasy world ruled by game mechanics. There you go. He goes on some quests. He tries to learn how the world works. And, there's some action. There's definitely some bit better fights in book 2 than there is in book 1. But even then, it's not a long story, so don't expect too much. It has promise, though. I really think this series can, if it was a novel and it had all the full-fledged detail that book 2 had, I would enjoy it. Really would. As a short story series, it's not everyone's cup of tea, though. So I recognize that. For me, it got a score of a 6 out of 10. There you go. Okay, on to Travail Online Broken. Now, this is a short story in the Travail Online LitRPG series. I'm not really sure where it falls in, because it doesn't... I read book 1, and I don't recall these characters there. I think I might recall 1 or 2. I haven't read book 2, so this may fall in post or pre that. I don't know. But I read it as a standalone story because the author doesn't say you have to read anything else before or after it. It is 30 pages. It is 99 cents. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. I'm going to read you the author's description of the story. No one is happy when King Frederick of Haven Scott asks the court medium Alua to accompany Sir Harold on a quest. The obnoxious knight threatens to undermine their mission left and right, abusing his companions, disrespecting the ogres in their homeland, and negotiating with the swamp wench when they are sent to apprehend her. When they return to Havensock, Alul seems like a woman changed for the worse. The king may be disappointed in her choice of champion, but is it too late to rein in the power of hungry knight? The author essentially tells you the entire story. I don't know why, but that's it, basically. And for me, this didn't really seem like a LitRPG story. There's no context given for the story. There's no explanation that it takes place in a VR fantasy role-playing game world. There's no explanation to the reader who the characters are or the relation to the main story. It's really just, here's some stuff, some people, they go do some things. And I'm not saying it's a bad storytelling. It's not. And you can kind of figure out as the story goes along, oh, this is probably a game. They're talking like gamer language, but it's never really explained in any way, shape, or form. It's just like assumed that you've read maybe book 1 or book 2 and you're bound to understand these people, and it's not clear. And there are a few game references, but the story mostly feels like a fantasy story about a selfish bad guy doing bad things and there being no redemption, no negative consequences for it, and it was just unsatisfying, and it wasn't a pleasant storyline. And for me, that's fine. Just tell me in advance so I know to read it or not. So for me, the story gets a 4 out of 10, not because it's not LitRPG, but because it just wasn't my cup of tea, and that's fine. Go read it for yourself if you want to check it out. It's short, it's not that long, and it's a pretty decent price, especially on Kindle Unlimited. So there you go. Okay, next book, The Crucible of Immortality, Book 1, Synthesis. Long titles. Written by Lido Blackman. This story is 160 pages. It is $4.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. First off, it's kind of expensive. It's almost 4. It's almost 3 cents, 4 cents a page for that, and that's a little pricey for me. I mean, for $4.99, you can get, Lion's Quest, which is like 400 pages. I'm just saying, it's a thing that stuck out. My description of the book. In a far-flung future, humanity is taken to the stars. On a colony ship, Jax is awoken from cryosleep to investigate a strange signal coming from another planet. The ship he takes to investigate is destroyed, and he wakes up to find himself stranded on an alien world that is ruled by RPG mechanics. Thankfully, he has a smart aleck ball of light named Kayla to help him figure things out. So there you go. The first 8% of the story is just setup. It explains why Drac is trapped on an alien world, where future alien tech has created a world ruled by RPG mechanics. There's a bunch of like stuff about him traveling from the Earth that's overpopulated, blah, blah, blah. The only thing you really need to know from the 8% is that he has a sister who's in cryosleep, and he's trapped on this alien world, ruled by RPG mechanics. That's kind of it. That's the only thing that's really relevant to the story. Okay, once Jack wakes up on the alien planet, he finds a glowing ball of energy named Kayla, who explains the fundamentals of the world. He assigns attribute points. The story gets, honestly, a little boring because it's this first like tutorial section, and it's about 30% of the novel. The first, 30% of it, where he's just killing things for getting a skill, kills something else, discovers or makes up a new skill, and that's okay. It's just, it's okay. That's all it really is. And it's not until like the 30% of the story where the main character starts to explore, I want to call it a dungeon in fantasy terms. In this case, it's a subterranean alien tech base with some monsters in it that he has to kill. Dungeon. And the story pacing picks up a bit after that. So it gets a lot more action oriented. You get more fighting on a regular basis. So it gets better after that, basically, from my point of view. And you also get an expanded cast of characters from that point on. You get, I believe, 3 new characters in the story very quickly after that. Now, the story really does try to combine science fiction and fantasy. It's essentially everything's explained away by science. Science so advanced that you might as well consider it magic. And that's how they explain away lasers and the nanites in the body that are changing people, so that when you assign stat points, they actually change you as a person. They make you smarter, brawnier, more agile, more wise, whatever the case is. So all those game mechanic stuff and fantasy magic stuff is explained away by science, alien science, which is okay. It's a nice change of pace, thematically, I should say. As far as the game mechanics go, nothing particularly special. I've seen better. I've seen worse. This is kind of average. There are a few spelling errors in the story. Be aware of that. There's also grammar errors. But again, they're not huge and they're not very often, but they do exist. A bigger concern for me as a reader is the formatting issues in the paragraphs. There are some paragraphs that are literally pages long with no breaks, and no breaks from, different thought sections, or for dialogue, or for descriptions. And that is to me more distraction than just a couple spelling errors here or there. Additionally, there are some issues with the tables in the Kindle version of the story. So be aware that if they pop up, it's not just you. It was me as well. And I'm sure the author intends to correct those and find those and make it better. But for me, it was kind of a distraction. I actually had to convert it from the Kindle version to a Mobi format, just so I could read those tables. Because that's a lot of information. The game part of it, anyways, that's described to the reader that way. So there you go. In addition, some of the dialogue feels forced, and the big reveal at the very end isn't a huge reveal, in my opinion. It seemed pretty obvious, but overall, still a really decent read. For me, it gets a score of 6 out of 10. So there you go. Okay, War in the Greenwood is next, written by Galen Wolfe. I believe this is a whole series, the Greenwood series. I believe this comes in 3rd. So this is the 3rd book in that series. I'm sure Galen will correct me if I'm incorrect. Okay, it is 289 pages at $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. When the evil Attila becomes the leader of the city of Harabia, which is the bad guy city, a plan is hatched by the forces of good to find a new ranger city as bait to show the good cities of the danger. Barcode the Ranger has been chosen to form and build up the new city in a real-time strategy type building system. He uses his skills to manage resources, hire non-player characters, and build up his new city in preparation for the war coming to the Greenwood. Honestly, each one of the books in this series is kind of different. They emphasize different game mechanics. The first book is about player versus player stuff. Book 2 is, I want to say it is the Rune Smith one, which is more about crafting. Book 3 here is large scale player versus player combat, real-time strategy stuff. And book 4 is, I believe, the Bard. Don't quote me though. It might be switching the orders, but the Bard is also talking about a class that nobody really plays, or it has a bad rap, I should say. And it's really interesting to see how that story develops differently in each one of these. And they all kind of connect in this particular show. Like the characters from all those other stories show up here. And that's kind of cool. I like that. And so I also enjoyed the real-time strategy aspects of building this Ranger City. And that's mostly in the first half of the story, about the first 30-ish%. And it's really interesting. I liked it. Now, there's also this real weird middle section that feels like a short story that was kind of inserted into it. It's about the 27 to the 42% mark. A few of the main characters in the story go on a quest to level up, and it's a fun whodunit mystery quest. And while it's interesting, again, it feels out of place in context of the story. And it really just feels like a short story. They're just like, oh, this is a good place for these characters because they're all in the story. We'll put it in. We'll get them a few levels so they're more powerful when they fight the bad guys. It's okay. I'm just not saying it as it kind of breaks up the overall narrative arc of the story, though. Again, after that 42% mark, though, action, large scale combat, city warfare stuff, plenty of cool stuff there. CGs, tactical combat, fun stuff. And that's pretty much the end of the story. The novel gets a score of 7 out of 10 for me. There you go. Okay. Up next is Rules Free VRMMO Life, Book 1 Tutorial, written by Stuart Grossi. Okay, it is 191 pages, 99 cents. It is available on Kindle Limited. Really good price point for that many pages. It's nice. Okay, this is a story. This is a villain story. The basic premise of the story is that a paladin from another MMORPG is quitting that game. Well, he's not just quitting, but he's actually transferring his character to a new MMO world where he can basically take those character abilities and turn them into points for his new character in the new game. And in this new game, there are no rule limits. Players are able to do whatever they want, and the game itself has no mechanics to stop them. Now, within the social context of the game, there may be people, rules, laws, states, abilities, other players who will stop players from doing whatever they want to, but it's all left to the social aspects of that game. There are no actual game mechanics like code that says you can't do this bad thing. And the author kind of uses that premise to tell a villain story, or as he call it, the evil campaign. And he describes it as the type of role-playing game, like tabletop role-playing game, where you just step aside from your normal campaign. Your players go off and do a bunch of evil things in this evil campaign, rape, murder, pillage, whatever it is, steal, whatever you want to do. And then they just go back to the normal game. It's kind of a temporary break from your normal story of heroes and magic and, epic stuff. And the author is very forward. He says it right in the front of the game, and he warns you many times saying this is not a hero story. This is not an anti-hero. This guy is a villain. Be aware. And he's right. This guy does bad things to people. Now, first off, I'll talk about the game mechanics story. They're good. They really are. The game mechanics are well thought out. They're described. They're interesting. There's a ton of information that the author gives you. Enough that you could even create your own character, which is kind of a litmus test for me, whether or not I'm getting enough information to call this LitRPG. In this case, plenty of stuff. And again, the beginning portion of the story is mostly informational. You get information about races, classes, attribute descriptions, a bunch of character description stuff. And then starting at about the 39% mark of the story, then the main character, finally makes all those choices, and he goes into the tutorial section of the game. Gets his quest, does his first fights, figures out the skill set that he likes, he levels up a little bit, and that's the rest of the story. And as far as action goes, this is nice. I mean, it's well described, a lot of variety. Again, really well thought out game stuff. Where the story loses me is in some of the evil stuff that the character does. And maybe it's hypocritical. I'm okay with the murder stuff. I'm really okay with killing people. It's a game. Whatever, I get that part of it. But for me, where the storyline kind of crosses the line for me is in the rape and in the spitting of a human and then roasting her alive to eat her later. I'm like, that kind of crosses the evil line for me. And so I finished the story. It happens towards the end. And And like, okay, this storyline is not for you. The author's correct. You need to know what you're going into when you read this, right? Because he already has book 2 planned out, I believe, for next month, and book 3 planned out for later on. So this is going to be an ongoing series for him. And this series is not for everybody. It's not for me. And so I'm not going to be reviewing book 2 because the author's right. It is LitRPG though. And so I'm reviewing it because I'm letting you know about it, because it would be a disservice to you if I decided that it wasn't cool. You know what I mean? You go decide, you go read it. It isn't for me though. And for some people, even the rape part, they might not consider it rape. But for me, anytime the character's ability to consent is taken away, whether it's by magic or whatever means, and the characters have sex, that's rape. And that's kind of what happened in the story. Spoiler. So for me, it just, the storyline didn't really mesh well with me. And for that reason, it gets a 4 out of 10. There you go. Okay. On to Conquest, a lit RPG story of the SciFan universe, book 1, written by Alric Idlos. There you go. This story is 476 pages, $4.95. It is available in Kindle Unlimited. Again, a really nice price point. Right on the money for me. Full disclosure, I received an early review copy. Now I'm going to read you the author's description of the novel. A primeval darkness threatens to destroy mankind. The world's largest gaming platform in the entire industry is led by a man with many secrets. The popular game Dark Force features the world of Zion, which has been plagued by the destructive will of the Leviathan for centuries. And the Leviathan has fed off the souls of men and his fodder has become scarce. He now turns to Earth with an insatiable hunger. Only a woman from Earth who levels up to discover a divine inner power can challenge Earth's apocalyptic fate. There's a lot of stuff in there, and some of it's true. We'll get to that. First off, I'm going to just be outright with my opinion here. This is not LitRPG. I read the entire thing, but I started noticing about like 20, 15, 10%. I'm like, where's the game mechanic stuff? 15%. Oh, look, there's like a tiny little bit, but that's kind of it. There's like a small brief chapter of the main character playing a video game, and it's not really LitRPG, but it's virtual reality games. So I'm like, okay, maybe it'll get better. 20%, same thoughts, nothing getting better. 30%, 40%, 50%. And by the 50% mark, I'm like, I'm halfway through the story, and there's really no LitRPG stuff here. At that point, there's like really this one chapter near the beginning where the main character is playing a virtual reality game, and he just does some stuff and then he leaves, and that's it. There's no LitRPG references in there whatsoever. There's no world, overall the world is not ruled by game mechanics. Nobody's transported to a game world. There's no character progression in a power arc according to those game mechanic rules. None of that exists by the 50%. And I started to question whether this is really going to be LitRPG. And by the end of the story, I was kind of mad because it isn't. It really isn't. This is portal fiction that has been modified as LitRPG, and it wasn't even done that well. There are a few chapters that are just awkwardly inserted in the story that have a virtual reality game section. I wouldn't even call them LitRPG; they're just virtual reality game stuff. And besides like a few modified references, this has nothing to do with LitRPG. It is portal fiction. There's a spy thriller aspect. There's an otherworld aspect. There's some religious undertones to it where like part of the world was taken away by, religious people a long time ago. And there's like religious quotes at the beginning of each chapter that don't exist for us, but in this parallel world, they do apparently. And I'm not saying it's not put together well. I'm not saying that it's not a cohesive storyline. I'm saying that it's just not LitRPG. And it turns out that my instincts, my hunch is absolutely correct. When I looked it up on the internet, it turns out that this is a recycled story. It was originally published in July of 2016 under the title Conquest, Rise of the Fifth Horseman, a cohesive SciFan adventure. You could find it in Goodreads. We'll have a link in the show notes for you to look it up. And that story makes a heck of a lot more sense than this thing, which is trying to be LitRPG and not doing a really good job of it. You can tell that the other story is what it was meant to be. And this was never intended to be a LitRPG story, but it was sort of modified to have a few game mechanics to maybe appeal to the lit RPG genre, or at least, get the tag lit RPG in the title of the story, and maybe make some sales. Now, the author, who uses the pen name Alec Eros, warns his readers in the very beginning of the story: there are many authors and readers who are adamantly trying to force lit RPG into their own narrower definitions. But in my opinion, what all lit RPG novels have in common is the euphoric feeling gamers experience when playing and leveling up in an MMORPG. And when I read that, when I read this, I was really kind of annoyed. And this didn't help, because this is not a lit RPG story, yet the author seems to have the gall to criticize other authors and readers for talking about and trying to guide and put some guidelines on what it is that the genre they love is. And for readers like myself, that just takes it to another level of disrespect, because not only have you as an author taken your old story, recycled it, added some game mechanics and say, oh, I'm lit RPG, buy my stuff. Then you have the gall to criticize them for talking about something that they love and trying to create some guidelines for it. And for me as an author and as a reader, somebody who's literally read hundreds of these books, who's given up a full-time job with benefits to do this podcast and write full-time as a lit RPG author, it's absolutely disrespectful and deceitful to me that you would do this. And if you were in college, you would get fined for plagiarism because you took your old story and tried to pass it off with something new without even letting your audience know about it. I mean, so that to me is my opinion. I understand that I'm passionate about this and that maybe I'm not objective enough. The story in itself, not horrible, not my thing. I'm not a big fan of these stories with a bunch of religious undertones, but that's my personal view. Intentional or not, I feel deceived by the author. I feel deceived the fact that he used lit RPG to make some sales and just try to modify a story that he published a year ago to fit within this community. And whether it's intentional or not, I don't know, but I'm telling you that's how I feel, and that's what I feel. Now, the author has since communicated back that he published this story again because there were some issues with his original Amazon account and it got taken down. Sounds fishy. But hey, that happened. And if it did, that's horrible, but it has nothing to do with this. The fact that you literally took your old story, added a couple chapters that have virtual reality game reference to it, and then are republishing it and trying to say, oh, this is LitRPG, come buy my thing. And it's the beginning of a series of LitRPG stuff. That is not cool. Again, that's my opinion. That's all it is. Folks at home, check it out for yourself if you want to. I don't think it's any good as a lit RPG story. I give it a score 2 out of 10. But hey, one man's opinion. I always encourage the readers and listeners to go check it out for themselves. Form your own opinions. It's on Kindle Unlimited, so you're not really risking anything if you read it that way. And write a review for it yourself. But that's it for the show, folks. The end. It's kind of a sour note to end on, but I don't want to sour the entire episode, so it has to come at the end. But that's for me, folks. Thank you very much for listening and watching to the episode of the podcast. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Patreon, of course. All those wonderful places. If you want to support us some other way, you can do so at litrpgpodcast.com/support. There we go. Again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening and watching and hanging out with me and talking about this thing that I love, LitRPG. Thanks. And until we can hang out again, remember, folks, to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye, everybody. Hey everybody, welcome to the LitRPG podcast. I'm Ramon Mejia, getting all set up for the podcast. La 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 la, whoa. Lion face. Lemon face. Lion face. Lemon face. Oh, stretch. Oh, okay. Think I'm cool. Well, my No, I'm not, but got to be that mindset. Hey, happiness, love, peace, joy, and free margaritas. Hey. Okay, I'm all set. Episode 51 of the podcast. Yeah. Sometimes my nose whistles. I try to avoid that. Okay. We're going to go in 3, 2, 1.